The Sadist is the first enemy that you'll encounter in The Evil Within outside of cutscenes, kicking off your journey throughout the collective thoughts of Ruvik as you frantically attempt to escape his lair deep below Beacon Mental Hospital. The Sadist's backstory is a bit convoluted as to who he was before he became dominated by STEM, since the only real information that we're given about him, prior to the DLCs, was his model description reading, "A creature born from the mind of a murderer, merged with Ruvik's madness. He has lost himself to rage, becoming murderousness personified," which is a pretty apt description considering what we see from him in the game. He is an overly aggressive brute who rushes towards Sebastian with his signature chainsaw every chance that he gets. It also explains his attitude at the start of the game, viciously tearing apart the victims who were unlucky enough to get themselves captured. During the course of the main game, we see the Sadist a total of 4 times. First in the escape of Sebastian from his lair in the beginning of the game, again in Chapter 3 when we have weapons to deal with this powerhouse, again in Chapter 6 where we are to tangle with him in a more enclosed location, and finally in Chapter 15 where he's sporting a new and shiny rocket launcher. And though during some of these encounters it may be quite difficult in order to do so, in each of them there is the possibility to kill the Sadist. In fact, in 3 of the 4, the game requires you to do so. Which of course begs the question of, if you're killing the Sadist, how is he coming back to life? And though we don't really have an answer, we can speculate as to how this occurs. During the 3rd DLC for the game, entitled The Executioner, we take on the role of a man who's been plugged into STEM named Pedro Martin. While inside of STEM, Pedro dons the avatar of the Keeper, suggesting that enemies like the Keeper, Trauma, and most importantly the Sadist, aren't tied to any one person who's been plugged into STEM. Instead, these creatures are avatars applied to different people plugged into STEM, transformed by either the will of Mobius, or more likely in association with the base game, the will of the core, Ruvik. There's also further evidence to corroborate this theory, as in the same DLC we get the opportunity to put a face to not 1, but 2 different sadists that Pedro will encounter in his journey. CB-212, a convicted murderer, and CB-205, an ex-soldier. Neither of them have very extensive backstories as to who they were before they donned the moniker of the Sadist, but it gives the credence to the idea that the Sadist is simply an avatar and not a representation of any one person. However, there are also mixed signals with this enemy that make this conclusion only half true. Starting with the model description, which seemingly cites the murderer that's been suggested in the DLCs as the one that we see in the base game, suggesting that, while there may be the ability for the core to create multiple Sadists, perhaps they all connect to this identity. Or perhaps STEM creates an imprint of certain people within its system, and we're facing recreations of CB-212 throughout the events of the base game. Any way you want to look at it, however, this foe remains constant in action and appearance throughout the game. Aggressive and brutal, whether sporting a chainsaw or a rocket launcher, this is a foe that you want to be sure you're prepared for.